Hi, everybody. It's week 5 of the 2021 session of the Indiana General Assembly. Welcome back. It was a busy week at the State House, and we have our CEO, Matt Greller, Lindsay Moss, Jenna Nepper, our legislative crew. We're going to start with something a little different this week. Matt spent the last couple of days on the computer with NLC, the National League of Cities virtual legislative fly-in. So he was talking to our congressional representatives for the last couple of days. Matt, why don't you fill us in on what's going on in Congress?
Thanks, thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, it was a fly-in Zoom style. It was quite productive, actually. Long day and a half, but Mayor Tolliver, AIM President, and I were able to team up with our friends from Kentucky and do about 9 or 10 visits with congressional folks. Hit a good number of our delegation, including our 2 state senators. I think both were quite thoughtful in their discussion around the latest talk about a COVID-related stimulus package. I think everybody has seen in the news that the president has proposed a pretty substantial relief package that does include directly relief, revenue replacement dollars for cities, towns, counties, and states. And I think that's, this was in conjunction with the National League of Cities. That's a major push for them. So we tried to drive home the point that our impacts will not be seen for, another 12 months or so because of the delay in income taxes and how Indiana unit of government use the income tax. And that seemed to resonate and seemed to be well taken. There's still a lot of partisan positioning, I will say, obviously in Congress, but both of our state senators seem to recognize that there is a need and will be a need in the future for local governments, in our case, to get some help from the feds with funding issues. And I think as everybody has read about, I think their primary concern is that the money not go to non-COVID related expenses that aren't a result of COVID, I should say. So that'll be something to watch for. But I'd say overall, we came away pretty optimistic that a relief package will be pushed through the congressional process, and it very likely, will contain dollars for local governments. How they're distributed and the timing and all those sorts of things still have to be answered, of course. But overall, the message is, I think we'll be seeing additional relief for Indiana cities and towns. So a good couple days, and thanks for asking. And hopefully we'll be sharing a lot more information with you in the coming weeks.
Lindsay, let's start with a little bit of an annexation update. We talked a little bit about this last week. What happened throughout the week?
Yeah, so on Monday, Senator Boots did call the bill down on the floor. It passed the Senate pretty handily, but there were 14 no votes. So it was definitely good that there was some resistance with those no votes. It is now pending in the House. The committee assignment hasn't been made yet, but we have already had preliminary discussions with the 2 committees that we think the bill would likely be assigned to by the speaker, and hope that this is the last of this conversation this year, but certainly that could change, and we might be dealing in the second half with the moving annexation bill.
I have you keep going, Lindsay, in terms of updating on previous issues. Last year was Senate Bill 148, a landlord tenant bill, rather a controversial bill that ended up being vetoed by the governor. That bill's come back in different form, or some of that language has come back in a different form. Why don't you talk about the landlord tenant bill in 1541 that's being discussed this year?
Yeah, so many of you probably remember, because obviously it made headlines when the governor vetoed the bill. It's a very unusual tactic for him, and I think it might actually be the only veto that he has issued in his time as governor. But this bill directly preempts an ordinance that the city of Indianapolis had passed that imposes some new requirements on landlords in terms of notifying tenants of what their rights and responsibilities are under a lease, and kind of gave tenants some new tools to prevent retaliatory acts by landlords. The language in the bill, though, had really concerning language that applied statewide, in addition to directly targeting an ordinance in the city of Indianapolis that prohibited communities from regulating any aspect of a landlord-tenant relationship. When the governor vetoed the bill, there was concern from a lot of stakeholder groups that this would make it easier for landlords to evict their tenants. And this was coming, right as COVID was taking hold, and just a lot of concern when there's going to be housing instability issues anyway, as a result of the pandemic, that maybe this was bad timing for a bill like this. So I think that was a lot of the reason for the governor's veto, in addition to that overbroad language that likely would have had an impact on many ordinances across the state that just hadn't been identified because it was a very abbreviated process that bill went through. It was added very late in the second half to an unrelated bill. So in any case, what they're going to do with the veto override, I think, is still unknown at this time in terms of the action that the House and the Senate will take to override the veto or not. But there is a very similar bill that you mentioned, House Bill 1541, that will be heard in House Judiciary Committee this coming week. So I would expect to see a lot of the same stakeholder groups that were involved last year with that conversation will also be similarly involved with House Bill 1541, regardless of what happens with the veto override.
All right, Lindsay, you're on the hot seat today. Let's talk just for a few minutes. We have a little bit of time. Let's talk a little bit about utilities, because there's an issue. I don't know about you guys, but it's been blowing up my Nextdoor app, and that is pole location for utilities, and it's House Bill 1164. And I don't know if that's coming up next week. I think you mentioned it's not on the committee schedule for next week, but it is being talked about a lot this session, and it has been moving thus far. So do you want to talk, it's a utility bill that seems to have a lot of different components in it, but small cell location is one of those things, correct?
Yeah, that's right, Jennifer. Many of you might remember back in 2017 and 2018, there were big small cell bills, and part of the discussion was whether in residential areas there could at least be allowed to be a sort of different process for these applications for new small cells to go through. And elsewhere around the unit, small cell poles are a permitted use. So there's no, local zoning process or whatever that these new applications go through, unless you're in a residential area that has been designated for buried utilities. So many communities, when that legislation passed, acted to designate certain areas in their communities as an underground utility area. And once that designation is made, any new applications for a small cell location would be subject to a waiver process. So in that way, there is a local process where homeowners and the providers all have to come to the table and work through these issues, and then subject to an approval based on that process, instead of it just being a permitted use. There is language in House Bill 1164, which was discussed this week in the House Utilities Committee, that would say if there's a single pole that's above ground in one of these designated areas, that your waiver process is essentially void, and small cells in those areas would be a permitted use again. So I would imagine that in a lot of the areas that were designated back in 2017 or 2018, that particularly in the older residential neighborhoods, there's likely going to be an above ground power pole in that neighborhood, which would nullify your resolution or your ordinance. So that's really concerning. I know in Indianapolis and other areas where there are a lot of small cell applications that they're dealing with providers that will have an impact. And as you say, it is definitely something that gets neighborhoods ginned up, I guess you would say.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation about that. Well, Jenna, it's your turn. This week, as we expect to see several bills coming to the floor, it's really ramping up our grassroots activity. What is it that people can expect to hear from you about this week?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Thank you to our members who've already reached out at the committee level, reaching out to your legislators about a variety of issues. But now, especially over the next couple of weeks, it's the time for these bills to go to the full floor. And so this week in particular, House Bill 1114 passed out of committee on Tuesday, was on second readings on Thursday. There was an amendment that was added that makes an exception for rules set by the Fire and Building Safety Commission, but this is the building materials bill. That amendment didn't change really the underlying bill, so we'll be reaching out today, this weekend, before it heads to third reading to make sure our members are reaching out to your legislators. We expect a lot of conversation on this bill. This is a bill that's been brought back, a topic that's been brought back multiple sessions. So as this week progresses, you'll likely be hearing from me and Matt, whether it's email, text messages, to get engaged on this issue and similar issues as the committee process speeds up and things go to the floor.
Hey, Jennifer, I'd just jump in there. I think I've said this in years past that if you get a notice via legislative summary, that's sort of level 3. Or level 1, I guess, if you will. If you get an email, that's sort of level 2. But if you get a phone call or a text message, that's our highest alert level. So I think Jenna and I and others will be probably making a lot of phone calls and sending a lot of text messages this weekend. So please act swiftly and quickly. Make sure that your legislators are being contacted on these various bills. We'll need to make sure they have a full understanding of where our position is as we head into floor votes next week, possibly next week.
Yep, I think that's really well said. And so also don't forget to check out the bill tracking list at the bottom of your legislative summary so that you can look at the list of all the bills that the legislative team is tracking this session, and make sure you reach out if you see something that gives you concern so we can follow up. And we will see you next week. And again, don't forget to watch your email, your phone, all of your devices for your special alerts this week. Thanks.